Hey guys, how are you? Today we'll be doing Claudius from the play Hamlet by William Shakespeare. My plan is to go thoroughly to this character, try to analyze the most important traits, and so yeah, basically that's it. Try to bear with me because it's gonna be a long video about him. Grab a paper, pen, note down stuff that I talk about, and stay focused. Anyway, Claudius is a very important character in terms of him coming up on a leaving cert. Very likely, he's been there before, has shown up on many higher level papers, mocks and leaving certs as well. Ordinary level, of course, he's always there. So if I were you, I would really focus on Claudius, apart from, you know, the other main character like Hamlet or something like that. I would bear in mind that he's a very targeted player, if I would say. So we might think that Claudius is perhaps like the most villainous individual in the play, but the king is not always a straightforwardly evil character. It's a very complex character to be analyzed. We can't absolutely be sure that the king is guilty of the crime that the ghost accuses him until the beginning of the third act, because at the beginning we're like, okay, maybe this, like Hamlet says, maybe this is not his father's ghost but a demon sent down from hell to, let's say, confuse Hamlet and make him commit, I don't know, some sinning act. In Act 3, however, we are known that, basically we are made known that this character Claudius has committed the crime. For much of the play, we are unsure of the character of Claudius, and also we don't know if, like, Claudius is definitely a murderer and a liar, because we are not given a clear conscience into his, like, mentality, alright? So Claudius may be a villain, but at least he sometimes feels guilt for the sins he has committed. What I mean is that when we meet Claudius at the beginning, we have no knowledge of the crimes, alright? So the whole killing of Hamlet's ghost happened before the beginning of the play, before this play even came into starting. He seems to be a very good politician and a very loving husband. However, Hamlet has definitely an obvious dislike of his new stepfather. It is the prince who seems to, like, churlish in his behavior at the start of the play. But however, as the play progresses, our suspicions grow in terms of Claudius himself. Now, once we know with certainty that Claudius murdered his brother to gain the throne, we just see how false and ruthless a man he is. And that is when we start to build up the hate towards his character. Now, Claudius is desperate to hold on to power and to ensure that his terrible crime remains a secret. He doesn't want anyone to know because he's the king, and if people know that, they will turn against him. They wouldn't trust him anymore because he committed, fratricide, so means killing your own brother to become a king. He cares little for others and acts purely out of self-interest, manipulating those around him to serve his own ends, like Polonius, because he died, right? And yet at times it is difficult not to admire the skill in which how he handles problems when they come out of this way. And I'm gonna list them down for you. So he first inherits an unsettled state with some bitter and vengeful neighbors. Norway is smartling from having had to forfeit land to old Hamlet after he defeated the Norwegian king in battle. So he gets that sorted. Secondly, Claudius is following on from a much loved and well-respected king. So, at the start of the play, Horatio describes old Hamlet as a goodly king. Claudius must therefore battle with the Danish people to gain their loyalty and respect. Great. And number 3, the third battle that the king must fight is a battle of wits with his stepson. This battle is essentially linked with the king's need to earn the respect of the Danish people, because Hamlet is a very much loved public figure. So before he can make any strong decisions regarding the prince, Claudius must consider how the Danish people will react. So those are the 3 difficult issues that he faces. How to settle something with the Norwegians, how to, let's say, become a better king than old Hamlet, because everybody loves old Hamlet, the one that he killed. And number 3, how do I deal with old Hamlet's son, Hamlet, because he is a very respected and loved person in the society, in Elsinore. So those are the three issues that he encounters. Now, number one, skilled politician. So he demonstrates by dealing with these, with the Norway issue and stuff, he demonstrates a very good knowledge of politics and how he, like, communication skills as well. So he's very diplomatic, and he's a very different kind of king to the warlike old Hamlet. He's not like, like raises his sword and draws it and like goes in. No, but he's a very good politician. He tries diplomacy prior to returning to and using physical force. So it is possible that by sending diplomats to Norway, he wants to negate the threat of Fortinbras without a fight. Or perhaps he is doing it to buy time in order to continue the arms buildup. Remember the way it was described as something is rotten in the state of Denmark, like people, like there's a lot of tension outside. So is he wasting time? Like, you never know what the plan is. So he's a very good politician. And whatever his reason, the approach is a success, and a potentially messy and bloody situation is resolved without a single life being lost, hence proving that he's a very good diplomat, skewed politician, I would say. Now, he's also able to listen and take advice. Now, he has a number of trusted counselors, of which Polonius is definitely one. Throughout the play, the king consults with these men and seems to value their opinion. Polonius is especially important to Claudius when he is seeking to understand Hamlet's peculiar behavior. He listens carefully to Polonius' claim that Hamlet is mad because of his love for Ophelia. The king also agrees to Polonius' plan to observe an encounter between Hamlet and Ophelia. So he has a lot of people around him, especially Polonius, who he takes, wouldn't say orders because he's a king, but he takes their advice. So this is what makes him a good king. He listens and takes advice from his trusted counselors, all right? Advisors. What else I could say? I could say that the death of Polonius presents the king with a particularly tricky political situation. Now, Claudius knows how rumors and stories will quickly spread throughout Denmark, and that his leadership will be called into question as soon as people start to figure out that, hey, Polonius is dead or missing. It is vital that the king control the message and protect his reputation. He therefore decides to summon the royal couple's wisest friends for an emergency conference on how to spin or explain to the world at large the recent dramatic events at Elsinore. He clearly remains very calm and level-headed through when things go on and as the play progresses. Now, he never loses his cool, and when faced with a pending attack from Norway at the start of the play, he does not rush troops into battle, making him again emphasizing the first point about how good of a politician he is. He bides his time and successfully sends diplomats to resolve the situation with the King of Norway. Now, this is a very important thing that I'm about to say. It could be argued that Claudius' response to the murder of Gonzago, the play that Hamlet has performed to prove the king's guilt, is calm and level-headed. He makes no comment about the performance, but he simply calls for the light and leaves the room. Now, his actions imply a lot, but the audience doesn't understand. So here you could argue that he still remains calm and level-headed despite all this accusation that's happening from the play itself and the players, on stage, and how they acted his own act of killing, like how it's all the same and how the poison is being poured in the ear. He remains level-headed, calls for lights and leaves, so storms out. So the actions tell everything to Hamlet, but nothing in the audience raises any suspicions because he knows how to act. Like, Hamlet understands, okay, so you killed my brother, definitely, my father, definitely, but the audience doesn't know that. So, the best example of Claudius' ability to remain calm in the face of crisis is when Laertes storms the castle, thirsting for revenge for the death of his father. Remember, Laertes at the beginning blames Claudius for the death of his own dad. Claudius manipulates him, gets him on his side, again proving to be a very good politician. Now, Claudius does not take fright even though his life is at risk. He carefully calms Laertes down and explains that he was not responsible for Polonius' death, even though maybe he really kind of was, agreeing that he could stand behind the arse and, spy. He's a master of spin, Claudius is a very modern politician in the sense that he places great bearing on how his actions are perceived by the general public. So, this probably stems from the fact that he is replacing a strong and much loved king, as well as from the controversy surrounding his incestuous marriage. It seems that from the outset of his reign, he is fighting a constant battle to keep the public on his side, because the public expects too much because they had a really good king, old Hamlet. Things seem to be going pretty smoothly for Claudius at the beginning of the play, and he addresses the court with a speech designed to put rest the diffuse the discomfort surrounding the hasty marriage. So he's trying to show the people that, hey guys, it's not as bad as you think it is. I am not a very bad king. I care for you and I care about my wife. Claudius diverts attention away from himself by focusing on the Norwegian threat, and people it's pure propaganda. Like, they don't focus on what they should be focused on, but they focus on an issue, a bigger issue. Like, now everybody's focused on COVID-19. Nobody's looking at hunger in Africa and stuff like that. Like, we're all looking at COVID-19. So if this was politics, our faces would be like, we would just completely forget about everything else and only focus on the pandemic. So this is what he does, and he's really good at it. So when his decision to try for diplomatic resolution proves successful, now the king seems to have proved himself, so being able to settle things, and critiques have nothing to say about that. However, the fact that Hamlet is uncooperative and acting strangely, this starts to cause the king problems. The prince is very popular with the Danish people, and he, Claudius, the king, must be very careful how to deal with him. So when Hamlet kills Polonius and poses a clear threat to Claudius, the king must make it seem that his decision to send the prince away is warranted and reasonable, because if he doesn't do that, then Hamlet will have everyone else on his side, and maybe that would cause the overthrowing of his kingship or kingdom. He declares that Hamlet now possesses a threat to everyone. See how he directs this message? Even though it only personally threatens him, he makes it a public issue, a public lawsuit. So he says, his liberty is full of threats to all, to you, yourself, to us, to everyone. This is a direct quote. The king also anticipates how he might be partially blamed for Polonius' death. He will be asked why the prince was permitted to freely roam the palace when he knew that Hamlet was of unsound mind, and Claudius will explain this by saying that he loved his stepson too much to confine him. And this is the quote, "But so much was our love, we would not understand what was most fit. Hamlet's exile must look like a carefully weighed political decision that serves the good of the estate, and not him personally, as I just said." Now, he also, the king, acts decisively. Claudius must be admired for his ability to listen to the advice of others, as I said earlier about Polonius. However, the king never, he never really shows his true intentions. When a decision needs to be made, he acts, and he never really, he doesn't really show at the beginning that he acts in a wrong manner. He thinks about his decisions first. We can argue that, or we can argue that he doesn't think before he acts. This applies also for Hamlet. So a good example of this is just after the king has spied on Hamlet's encounter with Ophelia. That is proved when for instance, we've got Hamlet and Ophelia talking. The king is spying on them. He doesn't really make irrational decisions. He just plans things out first and then acts upon it. He doesn't really burst out "Hey, I'm right here." No, he doesn't do that. But he slowly plans his wouldn't say revenge, but his plan to get Hamlet out of there, and he succeeds. But then Hamlet is rescued by a couple of pirates, comes back, and you know what happens. Now, by deciding immediately to have Hamlet sent to England, the king displays his ability to act in a timely manner. So he doesn't really also take all the time in the world. He is able to make rational decisions, but not take so much time. So he doesn't really rush into making decisions, but he doesn't take all the time in the world. Now, the problem with Claudius is that he's false, he's manipulative. For all the political skills he demonstrates throughout the play, Claudius is ultimately a despicable character. Once we become aware of the fact that he murdered his brother to gain the throne, we realize how insincere and manipulative a person the king actually is. And here is the moment where almost every reader, or the audience, the watcher, people that watch the play, start despising him. Claudius' words at the beginning of the play, addressed to the assembled court about our dear brother's death and how we with wisest sorrow think on him, are suddenly seen for what they are: false and completely spoken just for the sake of attracting attention and for show, to show that he's a good king. Meanwhile, he's the killer. The king tells Hamlet that it is the most natural thing to lose a father when there is nothing neutral about old Hamlet's death. Like, it's very saddening that you lost a father, but it's a normal thing. People lose their fathers and stuff, and this is what he tells him to comfort him. Well, it's not really comforting him, because it gets completely backfired about that with Hamlet. And Claudius also claims to love Hamlet when really the prince is nothing but a thorn in his side. He's bothered by his existence, and hence this is one of the reasons that we don't like Claudius, because he goes against our main character, the protagonist, Hamlet. And he says, with no less nobility of love than that which dearest father bears his son, do I impart toward you. Of course, Hamlet knows very well that Claudius is false and insincere. And he says that one may smile and be a villain about Claudius. So the entire time Claudius knows about Hamlet, Hamlet knows about Claudius. They just can't confront each other, and that happens until the final act and almost like the very end of the play. In Act 2, Scene 2, Claudius reveals a very manipulative streak that becomes more pronounced as the play continues, and that is seen through how he forces Rosencrantz, effectively makes him a good politician too, forces Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to spy on their old friend Hamlet. Succeeding in this makes him a really good politician. What did he offer them in return? They are promised a reward for their assistance, but of course they have no real choice but to obey the king. And how Rosencrantz describes it as the sovereign power and dread pleasures of the king, because he's the king and you gotta listen, right? However, it is only when he has to deal with Laertes that we really see how manipulative he gets. Not only is he a good politician, but he tells him that he is most sensible in grief for Polonius' death, when in fact he expressed no sadness upon hearing the news of the death of Polonius. Henceforth we see that Claudius merely lies about his feelings throughout the entire play, makes people believe him though when he succeeds with that. The king then plays on Laertes' genuine grief for his father in order to have him kill Hamlet. So he really turns guys against each other too, right? So he says, Laertes, was your father dear to you, or are you like a painting of a sorrow, a face without a heart? Wow, this being told to Laertes drives him crazy. Laertes now really wants to kill Hamlet, motivated by the words of Claudius. So, Claudius skillfully manipulates this hot-headed young man in order to have him eliminate the greatest threat of his kingship, Hamlet. So Claudius' sole problem in this entire play is Hamlet, and he gets Laertes against him. He's also very selfish and cold. He only really seems to care about himself, and his behavior is dictated by his desperate need to conceal his crime and to hold on to power. So when he hears that Polonius has been killed, he has no sadness expressed, just shocks that he himself could have been killed. Like if he was the one hiding in Gertrude's room, if he was hiding in Gertrude's room, he was the one who might have been killed. So he's really glad that it was Polonius. And he says it had been so with us had we been there. So he's grateful for the death of Polonius because it's not him. So it's very self-centered and cares only about his well-being. Similarly, he also, when he witnesses Ophelia's tragic descent into madness, he can also think of his own troubles. And he says, "O Gertrude, Gertrude, when sorrows come, they come not single spies." So when he hears about the death, the king can only express annoyance that the news will upset his careful manipulation of her brother, Laertes. So again, hearing about death, wow, how's that gonna affect me? Laertes now is gonna be overwhelmed with the death of Ophelia. Great. So he's thinking only about himself. Now, His relationship with Gertrude, now, the one person that Claudius might genuinely care for is Gertrude. So we might think that the relationship between them is genuine and that he really cares for her. However, we're not really given enough for insight, like an insight into their relationship, for us to be able to say with certainty what the king feels for Gertrude, his wife, right? The only time in the play that Claudius speaks of his love for Gertrude is in Act 4, Scene 7, when he is desperately trying to convince Laertes of his innocence in the matter of Polonius' death. He tells Laertes that he could not deal too harshly with Hamlet because he did not wish to upset Gertrude, and he exactly says, "She's so conjunctive to my life and soul that as the star moves, not but in his sphere, I could not but by her." However, it is difficult at this point of the play to trust anything that the king is saying. A little too late now to believe his words. He manipulated Laertes, had Polonius killed, wasn't even sad about the death of him, so yeah. Now perhaps Claudius is too selfish to really love anyone but himself. At the end of the play, he does little to prevent the queen drinking the poison. Another reason that we dislike him. Gertrude dies technically because of him. He wanted to poison Hamlet. She gets mistaken for it. She drinks it. He doesn't really put an effort to stop her from drinking it because that would reveal his plan. The king also is not completely inhuman, though. You gotta you gotta think that he's a person who has feelings. All right, I'm talking about Claudius. At moments throughout the play, we are made aware that he's suffering a guilty conscience because of his crime. So when Polonius speaks about how pious actions can be used to conceal the darkest sins, the king's conscience is troubled. In an aside, he speaks of the heavy burden of his crime too, right? So he says, "How smart a lash that speech doth give my conscience." It's Act 3. "The harlot's cheek beautied with plastering art," and that, alright? So when the king's conscience is again pricked by the performance of the play at the court, he attempts to pray for forgiveness, hence giving us some sort of a pitiful feeling, like we kind of side with him for a while, but then that again is gone when he commits other of his crimes and insincere actions. He says alone in a room, "Oh, my offense is rank, it smells to heaven." He knows that his soul is tainted with this terrible sin, and this causes him to suffer greatly. And he says, "O wretched state, O bosom black as death, O limed soul that's struggling to be free, art more engaged." Now, he desperately wishes to pray and be forgiven, alright? His sins are too great to be forgiven, however. That's what we're thinking as the audience. But he senses that his crime is too great, and it's just... He says that is there not rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow? And he's washed what white? His soul from all the sins committed. Very important. The relationship between Claudius and Hamlet is one that you really should be focused on as well. Hamlet despises Claudius, and it's mutual, by the way. So from the very beginning of the play, he has nothing good to say about the king. "Claudius is no more like my father than I to Hercules." That is what Claudius says about... that's what Hamlet says about Claudius. So technically, he's saying that he's just a very, very spiteful king that no one should, look up to. And comparing him to his own father, he's a nobody. When Hamlet is told by the ghost that Claudius is a murderer, he has a solid reason to hate the king, and his suspicion that Claudius is a false and despicable person is confirmed. "Oh, villain, villain, smiling damn villain." Claudius in turn claims to love Hamlet, though, on the outside, but he doesn't really, and says that he thinks of him as a son. And he says that, he tells him, by the way, in Act 1, Scene 2, "You are the most immediate to our throne," kind of puts him next in succession to the throne, "and with no less nobility of love than that which dearest father bears his son, do I impart toward you." He kind of assigns him, the throne. "Just please try not to overthrow me." Again, thinking about himself. However, as we mentioned above, the king's sentiments are never seen genuine, even at the early stage of the play. But Claudius has to treat Hamlet with the greatest of care, and there are reasons for this, and I mentioned them earlier. He is Gertrude's beloved son. It's his wife's son. He is very much loved by the Danish people, and he is the prince of Denmark, so he's next in line to become the king. It is important to note, however, that much for for much of the play, Claudius does not suspect that Hamlet knows he killed the old king. However, Hamlet does really know that since the beginning of the play, and there's no possible reason why the prince should know of the crime. Like, you can never think that there's a ghost that's gonna show up that's gonna make him, that's gonna tell him all that. Later on, he starts to think, hold on, maybe he knows and all that. There's no evidence, direct evidence to support this, but that's the way it is. Now, at the start of the play, Claudius is not overly concerned about Hamlet. This is another reason we don't like him. The fact that the prince is still dressing in black and mourning the death of his father does provide an awkward reminder of the past. Hamlet is also a member of the royal family with a claim to the throne, and he is very popular with the Danish people. It is important that Claudius does not make an enemy of him, and that he keeps him under careful watch the entire time. The king responds to this potential threat by ingratiating himself with the prince, declaring Hamlet to be his heir and saying he loves him like his own son. It is also quite possible that he asks Hamlet to remain in Denmark. Why? Just for the sake of keeping him under his guard, to watch him from behind, to see what's going on, and to observe him throughout the entire time, fearing that's gonna overthrow him. So again, self-interest. Hamlet starts to behave madly, and the king takes a closer interest in his behavior. It is troubling for Claudius to have the prince acting in a strange and irrational manner, and the king wants everything to settle at court and for normal life to resume as quickly as possible. He's constantly under pressure, thinking, hold on, he's gonna get to me, he's gonna overthrow me, he's gonna figure me out, the people are gonna take his side, he's gonna become king, I'm gonna die. All these negative thoughts are going through them. He just wants a normal life to resume as quickly as possible. And Hamlet remains the one element that he cannot control or address with diplomacy and political skill. He's gotta kill him, and he proceeds with that. In order to get to the bottom of the prince's peculiar behavior, Claudius summons his old best friends, Rosencrantz and Guilderson, who by the way also fail because Hamlet figures them out and why they're there. Now their mission is to talk with the prince and learn the reason for his apparent madness. He also goes along with Polonius' suggestion that they spy on Hamlet in order to learn if his mad behavior has been caused by love for Ophelia and by how she's not technically allowed to speak to him anymore because of what her father and brother Laertes told her. Hamlet speaks angrily with Ophelia, alright? After observing Hamlet's encounter with Ophelia, and this is relevant and I'll show you how, the king is quite troubled, and Polonius is technically still convinced that Hamlet's madness is a result of his love for Ophelia. Now this is important. Claudius remains unsure about this fact, and he says there's something in his soul over which his melancholy sits unbrewed. However, he still has no reason to think that Hamlet knows anything about how he murdered the old king. So although he does not know what else might be behind the prince's strange behavior, Claudius has seen enough and is no longer comfortable having Hamlet at Elsinore or at court over there by all means. By deciding immediately to have Hamlet sent to England, the king looks to act in a timely and very decisive manner. He wants him gone, he wants him dead. Now the performance of the play, The Murder of Gonzago, reveals to Claudius that the prince knows he murdered old Hamlet. This is a very important key turning point. When he hears that Hamlet has killed Polonius in Gertrude's room, alarm bells ring. He had been in the bedroom instead of Polonius, and Claudius would have now likely be dead if that was the case. And he thanks God, as I mentioned at the beginning, that that wasn't the case. Hamlet now poses a real and immediate threat to the king. He could ruin him by exposing his terrible secret. He also now seems capable of taking bloody revenge for the death of his father. Claudius describes the prince as the hectic in my blood and knows that he cannot relax until Hamlet is dead. Till I note this gone, or till I note this done, however mayhaps my joys were ne'er begun. In spite of the pressure he must be feeling, Claudius retains his composure and acts in a decisive manner. He has already stated that Hamlet will be sent to England. He now decides to make this happen as quickly as possible. However, at this stage, Claudius is no longer content to have Hamlet simply sent far away from Elsinore. He now wants the prince to be killed, because he is constantly a threat and he can't have himself relax about it. He therefore sends a letter with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, instructing the King of England to execute Hamlet upon his arrival. This is so important. Now Hamlet escapes from the ship, returns to Denmark, and this is where everything is gone. When Claudius tackles Laertes and masterfully brings him on side, he seems to be in a position of considerable control. He almost relaxes enough to boast to Laertes about how he has arranged to have Hamlet killed in England. When Hamlet's letter arrives, however, informing the king that the prince is back in Denmark, Claudius is shocked. For once in the play, the king seems terrified of something and has no idea about what to do next. His initial plan to have Hamlet killed in England was perfect because he could not be blamed for the death of the prince. It wouldn't be him who killed him, it would be the prince, the king of England. Now that Hamlet has returned, the king must once again work out on how to deal with this issue of Hamlet. Claudius' plan to have Hamlet fence with Laertes is quite clever. Once again, he thinks of a way to have the prince killed by someone else, keeping his hands clean. However, Claudius' shock at discovering that his first plan failed means that he wants to be absolutely certain that his next scheme will work, because he screwed up once. He doesn't want to do it again, because then that would just prove that he is, to himself, he would lose confidence, and he's prolonging the time that he might be, exposed by Hamlet, which means overthrowing kingship of his, or maybe even being executed due to treason. Not only will Laertes' sword be sharp, but it will also be coated in poison, trying to kill Hamlet in any way possible. But the king will also have a cup of poisoned wine at hand to give to the prince during the fight. So just kill the guy. Do everything you can to kill Hamlet. It can be argued that this over-planning ultimately leads to the death of the queen because she ends up drinking the wine, and of the king himself because he gets stabbed by the poisoned sword and killed and forced to drink from that cup of wine that is poisoned as well. This is everything basically. I know that it's a very long video and analysis of this, and I believe that I have gone through almost actually all what you need to know about Claudius on the Leaving Cert level. Guys, in case you have any questions, again I say this, please do not hesitate to put them down below in the comments or contact me for any information. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.